Thank you. This is Dan Lubley, Acting Director of Capital Planning and School Construction. Kathy, do you have the presentation available?
Yes, give me a minute.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Ellis, Board of Education members, Dr. Martirano, and Ms. Turner-Little. As stated, I am Dan Lubley, Acting Director of Capital Planning and Construction. Joining me this evening is Mr. Scott Washington, Chief Operating Officer, Ms. Renee Kamen, School Planning Manager, and Mr. Tim Rogers, Planning Analyst for School Planning. This afternoon, we are here to present to you the 2020 Feasibility Study. While the school system and board is concluding the fiscal year 2021 budget process, this study is the starting point and a resource as we begin the capital planning process for fiscal year 2022. This presentation will highlight the school system's needs within the next 10-year planning period. It is important to note that the 2020 feasibility study does not contain boundary change options for implementation in school year 2021-2022. Under the current policy and based on the anticipated capital improvement schedule with the completion of Talbot Springs Elementary School in school year 2022-2023, a boundary study should occur in the summer of 2021. Also, with the opening of new High School 13 in school year 2023-2024, a boundary study to open the high school would occur in the summer of 2022. At this point, I ask Ms. Kamen and Mr. Rogers to take us through the process in the 2020 feasibility study presentation. Next slide.
Thank you, Dan. Can I have the next slide, please?
I'm working on it. I can't get it to forward. Hold on.
Sure. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renee Kamen, School Planning Manager. As stated in Policy 6010, the School Planning Office prepares and provides enrollment projections and the attendance area considerations on an annual basis to the Board of Education. The feasibility study is that review. It provides a comprehensive review of the 10-year student enrollment projections for county schools. The annual planning document begins each cycle of the capital budget process. It provides new enrollment projections, proposes adjustments and additions to the capital improvement program and the long-range master plan, considers strategies to address enrollment growth or decline for the school system, and it follows the guidance of Policy 6010, school attendance areas. The projections presented in this document are based on the most current available data, including population growth based on students yielded from sales of existing homes and from projected new housing units. The capital planning process is an 18-month process and starts in January of each year and ends 18 months later with the school capacity chart, Apfo, in May of the second year. Can I have the next slide, please? Up one. Can you go to slide 3? Thank you. Development of the annual enrollment projection occurs in the winter. The projection is the foundation for planning and the feasibility study and the capital budget. We collect data from Hcpss as well as state and local agencies, and then use our GIS to aggregate the data by school to ensure we gain school level insights about trends. The data used is to project the September 30th enrollment. We use historical cohort survival, which looks at past student population patterns within the country to construct survival ratios and projecting a particular grade's progression through the school system. It's demonstrated on the chart on the screen, and the yellow shows a cohort of students moving through the system. In year 1, they are kindergartners. This particular cohort is exhibiting a growing trend. As you can see, students are joining the cohort each year. We divide the new enrollment by previous years to get a ratio. We collect the histories of these ratios and then apply those histories to make our projection about what will happen next. In addition to the calculation and application of cohort survival ratios, the Hcpss utilizes many data points in order to project student population, including live birth data, first-time sales of newly constructed homes, resales of existing homes, apartment turnover, and enrollment at regional programs. Each data point is projected separately based on specific appropriate methodologies for each category. It is important to know that new construction is only new construction for the first year in the Hcpss projection. After the first year, the students are generated by homes constructed in a previous year are counted through cohort survival or resales. Next slide, please. We continue in a time of enrollment growth in Howard County. To demonstrate this, we have displayed the decreases and increases of the student enrollment over the last 3 enrollment periods. New students arrive at Hcpss each year and are mainly from new homes, resales, and kindergarten students enrolling in Hcpss for the first time. The exiting group of students in the orange include those graduating or students who have moved from the school district. In 2019, we received a net gain of 948 students across all levels, which represents a 1.66% enrollment growth over 2018. Next slide, please. Over the last decade, on average, the school system added 781 new students per year. However, in the last 3 school years, there has been a slight decline in new student enrollment. 2010 was the end of the recession and enrollment growth steadily increased through 2015. However, in 2016, it dropped some. 2017, we saw another year of student growth over 1,000 students. Enrollment is increasing, but at a slower rate than it has in recent years. Next slide, please. Our office reviews and updates our projection each year to incorporate the latest data and trends related to all of the factors that contributed to our projection. For this reason, projections vary from year to year. The large chart above shows the projected countywide enrollment for years 2020 through 2024 as presented in projections developed between 2016 and 2020. The trend data used in 2016 projection indicated a much higher enrollment for this time period than in recent projections. The smaller chart shows the projected enrollment increase between school year 2019 and 2020-2021 from the previous 5-year projections. This further illustrates how annual updates process allows us to fine-tune projections for the near term and how longer term projections can have larger error but are still important for planning. Hcpss 10-year K through 12 projected enrollment for school year 2020, 2021 through 2031 continues to show enrollment growth at all levels, but at lower rates compared in recent years' projection. New seats are still needed, and investment in capital projects will need to continue as we catch up from recent growth and future growth is still projected. It is anticipated that for school year 2020-2021, we will receive a net increase of over 740 students, and over the next 10 years, the school system is projected to receive approximately 6,400 new students at all levels. The trend in 2020 projection for elementary school enrollment is to increase by 2,700 students by 2029. As a result of this enrollment growth, the capacity utilization of all elementary schools combined will begin to exceed 110% by 2028 if new elementary school seats are not built. The middle school projected enrollment is expected to increase by nearly 1,100 students by 2029. And as a result of this enrollment growth, the combined capacity utilization of all middle schools will begin to exceed 110% beyond 2026 if no new middle school seats are built. High school enrollment growth is projected to increase by nearly 2,600 students by 2029. And as a result of this growth, the combined capacity utilization of all high schools will begin to exceed 110% beyond 2022. May I have the next slide, please? Over the past 10 years, the countywide error rate has ranged from 0.05 to 0.6%. And for school year 2019-2020, the countywide enrollment was projected 66 students lower than the official enrollment, representing an error rate of 0.1%, with approximately 87% of the projections by school having error rates at or below 5%. And approximately 38% of the projections by school were within 10 students of the actual student enrollment. The key finding from the 2019 projection accuracy projection compares favorably with experience of the past decade and demonstrates the model is providing consistent estimates. This year, however, the projection year is unique for Hcpss. While all school enrollment projections attempt to predict choices families will make that impact future enrollment using historical data on those choices, this projection will be impacted by three factors not reflected in our recent historical data. The first is the boundaries adopted by the board in 2019. The second will be the impact of APFO that delays new construction. And the third is COVID-19. Individually, these events would have a notable impact on student enrollment, but combined, these impacts could be unprecedented and unpredictable. Staff does anticipate that future projections may differ for this one for many schools. Next slide, please. Equitable evaluation of the impact on projected enrollment requires accurate representation of school capacities. Capacities are not necessarily fixed to the capacity designed when a school building is first open. Change in space usage, program location, and building or program specifications can change capacity. Capacity methodologies have been reviewed for program expansions. The result for those capacity studies are the baseline for recalculation capacities due to the relocation of regional programs and additions or renovations. For school year 2020-2021, the expansion of several special education programs and pre-kindergarten classes necessitated recalculation of the capacity at some schools. These changes are included in the post-measure charts in the feasibility study in order to compare between the end of school year 1920 and the beginning of school year 2020-2021. We note that while programs are being added, it may not be necessary to subtract capacity because the program spaces that have been allocated. For example, an early childhood program can be added to a school, but can be coupled with an existing program. For example, adding an afternoon early childhood program with an existing morning program. The opposite can be true with relocating a program when this room does not meet square footage standards defined by the capacity methodology. School planning would like to note that these capacities were based on the proposed FY21 operating budget, and we may need to review them upon the adoption of the operating budget. And now I would like to turn it over to Tim Rogers to review the elementary, middle, and high school needs and strategies over the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee, and good afternoon, everyone. For school year 2020-21, we're projecting 9 elementary schools to be utilized above the target range of 90 to 110%. A total of 21 elementary schools are projected to exceed 110% within the next 5 years. Capital projects, including the replacement of Talbot Springs and 3 new elementary schools, are critical pieces of the strategy to provide needed seats as enrollment continues to increase. Boundary reviews related to each of these projects will enable relief of surrounding schools. New capacity at Talbot Springs should be used for relief of schools in Eastern Columbia, including Atholton, Cradle Rock, and Phelps Luck. New elementary number 43 in the Southeast should provide relief to several schools, including Bowman Bridge, Forest Ridge, Fulton, Gorman Crossing, Guilford, Hammond, and Hanover Hills. New elementary number 44 in Western Columbia should provide needed crowding relief for Bryant Woods, Clarksville, and Running Brook, which is projected to become crowded as Columbia Town Center continues toward build-out. New elementary number 45 in the Northwest could provide relief for future crowding at Manor Woods, Northfield, St. John's Lane, Veterans, and Waverly. In the interim, many of these schools have relocatable classrooms, and projections will be monitored each year for additional relocatable classroom placement. Please note that in the strategies presented on this slide, new elementary school number 44 is proposed for Western Columbia, while number 45 is proposed for the Northwest Turf Valley area. Next slide, please. At the middle school level, we're projecting 5 schools to be utilized above the target range for school year 2020-21. These 5 plus 4 more are projected to exceed target range in the next 5 years. Since the need is more geographically distributed at this level, instead of new schools, additions are recommended for schools already in need of renovation. As planning begins for each of these projects, it will be important to maximize the potential for adding capacity to these schools. With boundary adjustments, the addition at Dunlogan Middle School could provide relief to Burley Manor, Mount View, and Folly Quarter. Additional relief for these schools comes from an addition renovation at Patapsco Middle School. An addition and renovation for Oakland Mills Middle School recommended for 2026 could provide needed relief to Hammond Middle School and Thomas Viaduct. Until the projects are able to be completed, the need for relocatable classrooms will be reviewed annually with additional units placed as needed. Additionally, new ideas that utilize existing school buildings and properties should be explored to maximize the buildings and sites already owned by the school system. Next slide, please. At the high school level, boundary adjustments adopted in 2019 will provide some relief to the most crowded schools using Western capacity. 4 of our 12 high schools are projected to be over target utilization for school year 2020-21. Another 4 schools are projected to be utilized above target range over the next 5 years. Depending on the scope of boundary adjustments for the opening of high school number 13, along with the addition of Hammond High School, crowding could be addressed at any or all of these schools. Potential high school 13 boundaries reviewed in 2019 followed 2 main patterns. If a more linear boundary following Route 1 to the northeast is adopted, relief will be focused on Hammond, Longreach, and Howard, with secondary adjustments to other schools to balance utilization. If the high school number 13 boundary is more compact, staying in the southeast, then Hammond, Oakland Mills, and Reservoir would see primary relief, with other schools seeing relief from secondary adjustments. Recommended additions at Centennial and Oakland Mills High School in the next 10 years could provide additional relief coupled with needed renovations. With focused boundary adjustments, Mount Hebron and Marriott's Ridge could see crowding relief from additional capacity at Centennial, while Longreach and Howard would be the primary beneficiaries of additional seats at Oakland Mills. Of course, these strategies include focused and effective boundary reviews to achieve improved capacity utilization at adjacent schools. In the interim, most of the schools shown on this slide already have relocatable classrooms, and all schools will be reviewed annually for the placement of additional relocatable classrooms. At this time, projections indicate the possible need for a 14th high school in the early 2030s. Since this need is indicated in the later years of our projection, the most effective use for this information is in long-range planning and property acquisition efforts. With the availability of large parcels of land decreasing and the cost increasing, it will be necessary to explore new prototypes for the 14th high school that allow for all needed amenities on a smaller footprint. Next slide, please. This graphic explores new capacity projects at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. Specifically, this figure shows key changes from the 2019 feasibility study and recommended timing of planned and proposed capacity projects. As planning for the Talbot Springs replacement, High School 13, and the Hammond High School renovation addition are already underway, the recommendation is to keep them on track. Recent boundary changes and evolving housing and enrollment trends are indicating new elementary number 43 may not be needed until 2025, 2 years later than recommended in the 2019 feasibility study. The Dunlogan Middle School, Oakland Mills Middle School, and Patapsco Middle School renovation additions are recommended for 2024, 2026, and 2028, as in previous studies, but for Dunlogan and Oakland Mills, more seats are recommended. At the high school level, it is recommended that the Centennial High School renovation addition occur earlier than previously noted and include more seats. A new capital project renovation addition for Oakland Mills High School for the early 2030s is also listed. Another important change from the 2019 recommendation is at the elementary level, where we are recommending elementary school number 44 be moved back to 2028 and placed in Western Columbia, with elementary school number 45 now planned for Turf Valley in 2030. The 2019 review and updated data regarding development projections and student yields indicate the downtown Columbia area will have a greater need sooner than schools in the Northwest. Next slide, please. As Mr. Lubley stated at the beginning of the presentation, the 2020 feasibility study does not contain boundary change options for implementation in school year 2021-22. Planning is underway for the replacement of Talbot Springs Elementary School. Scheduled for completion in summer 2022, the new school will have 160 seats more than the existing one, providing an opportunity to improve crowding at Cradle Rock Elementary, Phelps Luck, and Athelton Elementary through a boundary review. The map shown on this slide displays areas with a high and moderate probability of being affected by this boundary review. Under current policy, this boundary review would begin in the spring of 2021. Next slide, please. Also in the construction phase, New High School 13 is scheduled to add 1,658 seats in 2023. The Hammond High School addition is scheduled to open in the same year, adding 200 seats of capacity. High School number 13 will be within the current Hammond High School attendance area, requiring major boundary adjustments in the southeast. This map shows the areas with high, moderate, and fair probability of being affected by this boundary review based on hypothetical plans developed and presented during the 2019 boundary review process. Based on current policy, this boundary review will take place in the spring and summer of 2022. Next slide, please. And with that, we'll conclude, and I want to thank you for your attention as we welcome any questions that you may have at this time.
Okay, I'm not muted anymore. Okay, we'll start with Ms. Coombs.
Thank you very much. Just a question about the implications of withdrawals in private school in terms of how that was tracked throughout the summer. And as you noted, the redistricting and the COVID-19 things are not known, but are there any notable withdrawals that were apparent in some of the elementary schools that were affected by redistricting this year? Thank you.
Hi, Renee Kamen, school planning. Actually, we have not yet taken a dive into any withdrawals. We'll start making requests for data starting in the fall again in order to capture any of the 2030 enrollment. I don't know if Tim, you want to add anything to it. We do expect that there will be some withdrawals. We also do expect there will be some admittance that happens a lot after any boundary changes.
Okay, Dr. I have Ms. Caternio was next. Ms. Caternio.
I just want to talk about some of the Oakland Mills planned out for past 2030. That school, along with Centennial High School, has been waiting for a major renovation in HVAC since 2009, I guess at least. And so I'm really concerned about pushing that project out that far. I mean, that's 20 years. And so I know that, we're going to be adding seats and all, but in the meantime, we've deferred projects at the school because we keep saying we're going to do it. And it keeps getting pushed out. And I'm really concerned about that issue. And that's not the only school. I mean, I'm concerned about Oakland Mills Middle School. Also, I know it's on the docket for 2026, but I am concerned in the meantime for those schools, facilities for the HVACs and such like that. So I just wondered if you could speak on that a little bit.
Again, good evening. This is Dan Lubley, Acting Director, Capital Planning and Construction. If I could step in a moment here.
Sure.
I do want to make a a
And if I'm wrong, please correct me.
No, you are correct. And based on what was presented here in the feasibility study, the clarification I do want to present is the feasibility study truly is a look at the needs of the school system. And the recommendations that are provided within the feasibility study are based off of those needs, primarily the capacity and seat needs of the school system. It is, as I stated at the beginning, a resource that lends us to take a look at our capital projects and our capital schedule. And along with this resource, as well as the maintenance records with school facilities, those are two of the items that we will take into account as we move into the fiscal year 2022 capital budget.
So I guess it's more appropriate for the capital budget for me to bring this up, but I know it's part of the long range plan and that's included in the feasibility study. So that's why I just brought it up. And I just wanted to mention it because I think I know it is a concern. Switching gears a little bit, Fulton Elementary has a higher projected enrollment for this fall, the latest numbers than when we redistrict it. I think I forget, 58 more students are set to enroll than what we had projected in November with the boundary line changes. And so now we're adding a program, I think it's 100 kids, 100 preschoolers. I'm just wondering what the impact is there because now the school is back over 100% with the latest projection. And now we're adding in, we're taking away seats to use, which I know they were originally designed for, these classrooms for early education. But I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and what the plan is there. Because preschoolers take up room. I mean, they are there. They're not, they take up a lot of room actually. So I'm just wondering, I just was kind of concerned about that.
Sure, I'll try and answer that question. We collaborate with our special educators about their growing needs, and we have to make a lot of hard choices based on a couple of different factors. One is the school able to take it, and meaning is there space, 2, transportation, 3, where the students are being projected by our special educators to be at. When it comes to we have a lot of challenges. We're facing a lot of challenges when it came specifically to Fulton. We are reliant upon the relocatable that actually has been placed there. And we felt that with the timing of new elementary school 43, we would better balance it. The result that you're looking for in terms of the projection versus what is going to occur with the capacity utilization is actually in the post Apfo charts in the feasibility study. And I'm trying to find the page for you. I'm just trying to scroll through. I believe it is page 34.
Okay.
So that capacity should be reflected for Fulton in that. And so with that change to both the projection and capacity, it's anticipated to be at 117%, I believe, if I'm reading it correctly. So that it's getting harder and harder for us to balance all of the needs in the school. So we felt that in having this conversation with all partners, that with the ability to have that 9-spot relocatable and coupled with the timing of the next capital budget, capital expenditure in the area, it might be the best place for the time.
Okay. I have a few more questions, but I see just Dr. Wu's hand is raised, but I'll let anyone else ask questions before I ask my other ones. Thank you.
Dr. Wu.
Thank you. And I think I share the same concern with Ms. Cottrell. Another 2 questions about Heights Elementary School in Turf Valley, because they're fast development pace. And I know we're purchasing the land and we're going to make a deal to get the land. And what's the strategy to remedy the overdevelopment that side? Then for high school 14, we said we should have a school in Elk Ridge. exactly our strategy there? Because their land may be available. Do we need to reserve that in case somebody will take land and we don't have land in the future at all?
Regarding Turf Valley, one of the major considerations with the crowding in the western and northern parts of the county, there's available capacity, I want to say about 150 seats in Bushy Park. We have proposed several years in a row to try and best utilize Bushy Park and part of Triadelphia Ridge. So that is one of our main considerations. There's available capacity that can be used through a boundary study that would better take hold of the availability there. When it comes to High School 14 in the mid 30s, with our projection taking our 10-year projection, our average error is about plus or minus 5%. This is a planning tool for us. We should actively work and try to secure funding in our capital budget for money to purchase land ourselves, work with our partners at the county to help identify land in order to reserve it. But the other prong of it is our current policy 6000 requires a minimum of 47 acres depending on the population of the school. And we need to also take a look at the size because land is diminishing in Howard County, and finding 47 acres or even 40 acres or 32 acres is getting more and more hard to find. So it's going to be a conversation that needs to be had pretty soon between all of the partners to identify a better way of securing land for future use.
So can you go on with the policy changes? Maybe we need a few smaller land for the future, right? When should we talk about that policy? When do you think is a good time to bring the board for discussion on that?
So I would have to check with Dr. Hunter when policy 6000 is up for review, but that could be an appropriate time to have the discussion. It would need to involve our architects in order to find other examples and survey the land. But looking at the policy, that would be a good start as well.
Okay, I really appreciate it because I just feel we have less land in the future, but we will have more crowded area everywhere. For example, one example, we probably need to build a little higher, taller building than before, like elementary school, maybe just 2 stories, 3 stories. So that will change the way we think about the problem before. And then I just want to make sure the policy is ready for you guys when you need it. We just say, okay, we have a policy, we have a constraint, we're not able to talk about that. I don't want that to happen.
Okay, are you good, Dr. Wu?
I'm sorry, Ms. Ellis, if I may expound.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Not a problem. I do want to point out, Dr. Wu, that we are in the Office of School Construction, we are continually reviewing our prototype plans. While our prototypes do offer us a lot of affordability for convenience, familiarity, and cost savings, we are always trying to look for better ways to produce our buildings. So your points are taken, and we are constantly looking at ways to expand and potentially come up with a different building type, which will allow us to take better use of the available land that is out there.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Delmont Small.
Thank you. So my first question is on page 14 of the feasibility study. And you have a table of table 2.7 refers to school capacity and regional program changes for school year 2021. And you are adding different programs to some schools. And I'm curious, for example, for Deep Run Elementary School, there's 0 change to capacity, yet you're adding a MINC in preschool. And there are others where, for example, in Waverly, you're adding a program. In Glenwood, you're adding a program. And those are just examples. And there's no change to capacity. How is that possible?
I'm actually going to let Tim Rogers jump in on this conversation.
Yeah.
It was an extensive review, and he can walk you through the process that we did with our special educators.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. That's a great question, Ms. Delmont Small, and I know it's kind of a complicated answer, and I'll try to summarize it as best I can. Essentially, what we do is when a program is being added to a building, such as at Deep Run with the MINC-P, we take a comprehensive look at the capacity for the whole building. So in some cases, these buildings haven't had a capacity calculation update since 2013 when they were initially evaluated. So we take a look at Deep Run, for instance, and all of the room uses from the current school year, factor in that MINC-P program in the room that the school has suggested or is considering using, and then recalculate. So in some cases, the use changes in the other rooms between calculations mean that when we incorporate that new MINC-P room, it ends up being a wash.
Okay, so then all of those are washes then?
Well, if you could look at other examples like Bushy Park, where we're adding a program and expanding another program, and the capacity actually increases. And that's a situation where, because of changes to the room uses, the way the school is using each room since 2013 when it was originally calculated, because of those changes, even adding these rooms doesn't create a loss of capacity. So it's a function of updating the entire capacity calculation of the building to reflect current usage while factoring in this one change. And in some cases, and I know it looks confusing, and I'm sure the explanation is a little confusing too, but in some cases, it does result in either that new program capacity recalculation comes out in the wash, or in a rare case like Bushy Park or Wild Lake Middle School, actually the capacity goes up a little bit.
Okay, so for example, Waverly, you have that there is not going to be a change with Waverly, even though you're adding a MINC pre-K program.
Right.
And the official enrollment for Waverly in 2019 was 889, projected for 20 was 864, yet the Waverly local capacity is 788. So how is it that there's no impact on rooms if the particular school is already overcrowded to begin with?
Yeah, that's a good observation. And at Waverly, I think the situation there was that they're actually going to have a reduction in staffing for next year due to a little bit lower than expected enrollment, and probably also in response to being coming out from redistricting. And the case there is that after we worked with the principal to update their room use plan and recalculated the capacity based on that updated plan, factoring in that one MINC pre-K room didn't require us to subtract any rooms that would be counted towards capacity.
Okay. So with updates, and so the capacities that are listed here, have they been updated? Actually, let me ask the question this way. There are class size increases that the school system does. How does that impact the capacity calculations?
Well, the numbers that we have used have been in place since the last time that each level was studied comprehensively. So, and this is the capacity of the building as a whole, not necessarily the student to teacher ratio in place right now.
But to some extent, doesn't that impact it? Because if you're basing a capacity of a building on a number of students, right, on a class size, and now we're changing that class size, you're telling me there's no impact?
Yeah, and Renee, feel free to jump in if you have another thought on this.
Sure, I can do that, Tim. Mrs. Delmont Small, when the office initially did the capacity study review, there was an actual student to teacher ratio recommended for capacity and calculating the capacity. It's a point in time. We have not, our office, whenever we calculate capacity, we don't look towards the student teacher ratio for purposes of delivering the academic side. We are looking at the point in time when we had when we were looking at the capacity studies. So yes, it does allow for more students in the room, but no, it does not change the how we would judge whether or not a school overall is over or under capacity. The board has defined those through our methodologies. Back in 2008, I believe, was one, and 14 and 15 was another for each level. And of course, that could be reviewed again if that is the desire of the board moving forward.
Well, I was going to mention that because when this initial capacity study was done, you're talking about the Gilbert study, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And how many years ago was that?
I believe the one was in 2009.
That's high schools.
That was high schools. I believe elementary schools was right before Duckett's Lane Elementary School opened up, which would have been 2013. Am I correct, Tim?
I'm going to say elementary was 2013 and middle was 2012.
Yes.
And Gilbert did do all of those, Ms. Delmont Small, but I think the Gilbert, the quote unquote Gilbert study, where they evaluated all the square footage and the entire building and its functionality was a little bit earlier than that, in the late 2000s.
Right. That's what I was thinking. And
Yeah.
I appreciate that your perspective is the capacity. However, the board's perspective is not only capacity, it's also the learning piece of this.
Sure.
And as we all know, and I think as any parent can tell you, or educator can tell you, that there can be an impact of having a lot of students in a much smaller space than was designed for the number of students who are attempting to learn in that space.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
I think that this is something that the board itself may want to think about going down this road again. And I'm going to end with the issue of how we look at where our students come from. And what I mean by that is we talk about new construction versus resale construction. And is it fair for me to assume that we have the capability within our student system of where we track everybody, that if a new house came online, so to speak, and in the first year, the house yielded one child, that you would be able to tell me if I said, okay, I would like to know when a new house is built, what the yield of students are and at what level, for example, for the first 3 years of the house's existence. And the reason I'm asking this is because there's a lot of back and forth as to, well, the students aren't really coming from new construction, they're coming from resale. And I believe that there is an opinion that would not necessarily consider a student who is born the second year after a new house was built to be because of resale. Am I being clear with how,
I think so.
or am I mixed?
I can try to respond, and if I don't hit it, we can
That would be lovely. Thank you.
keep going. Sure. So I think at the elementary level, we're looking at how did each student arrive at the school they attend, and in each year we're reviewing that data and those calculations. So in your example, a student that was born the second year a house was occupied, a new home was occupied, we would be capturing them as a birth in that attendance area and projecting them to arrive in kindergarten 5 years later, using either an average of birth to kindergarten cohort rates or an average kindergarten size. And then resales are any home that was not new to that school's attendance area, from which a new student is arriving at the school. Those students contribute to the yield calculation for resales for that school. So whether if a house was built one year, in 2015, and no students arrived at the school in 2015, but then a new student arrived in 2016, they're going to show up in our cohort survival rate because they were either younger than school aged when their family moved in, or they were in a private school or something else. Or maybe they were still at their previous school to finish up the year there. There could be a lot of situations where that could happen.
Okay, so I just want to jump in because we're really kind of getting over with just our feasibility study. And we'll be discussing this feasibility study in detail, I'm sure, over the next few months. So if you have questions that are generally about things like Ms. Delmont Small was asking about resale versus new construction, if you could talk to our staff about those offline as we try to look specifically at issues on our feasibility study. Was that your last question, Ms. Delmont Small?
No, I just wanted to express my continuing concern for the overcrowding within our schools and looking at what is on the list for upcoming capital projects, and that we have projects on there that would yield some capacity, not enough, but the probability of them getting built is not very optimistic. So since this is our way of trying to explain what our needs are going to be in the future, and as it was rightfully mentioned, there is less land as opposed to more land, how are we doing as far as moving from building a new school model to an addition or renovation model?
So I'll attempt to take this. That actually is one of our strategies in this feasibility study. We are quote unquote land rich when it comes to our elementary schools sites in our land bank. Over the last 3 years, we've been pretty aggressive in obtaining sites for elementary. We do have a middle school site, and that's off of Marriottsville Road. So this feasibility study actually has attempted to look at both where we anticipate the students coming from, where our renovations are coming up. We would love to have everything built right away, but we understand the fiscal responsibilities and fiscal realities of our county. So we were trying in this feasibility study, especially to merge the fact that land is harder to come by. We do have projects that are up and coming in terms of our renovation needs. And so marrying those two items specifically when the need is all over the county and concentrated in little pockets, that's the biggest strategy that we're using in the middle school at this point.
Okay, that's
we'll
great.
go ahead and move on because Ms. Delmont, you've asked several, and we can come back to you. Ms. Caternio, or do you not have anything?
I'm going to let Ms. Mallow go ahead because she hasn't spoken yet.
Ms. Mallow?
Thank you. I want to specifically ask about Bryant Woods Elementary School as a result of how things look for next year. I know that it's projected to be over capacity by it's a small school, so any small number of children look like a large amount of overcapacity. So I was hoping that you could address what's being done to remediate that concern, but also to share with you as at least one, if not more than one, individuals has reached out to me as the cluster rep to express their concern about this and wondered about the underutilization at Swansfield vis-a-vis the overutilization or overcapacity yield at Bryant Woods, and if, given their close proximity, if there wasn't a small resolution available, if we didn't feel like it could be adequately managed.
So with Bryant Woods, Ms. Mallow, initially we are adding relocatables to that site to help in the interim, and then in the little bit longer term, we're recommending elementary 44 for Columbia. And I think we're suggesting we're recommending it to be placed earlier than the capital budget proposal. So those are some of the measures in place, and what you're suggesting for some sort of resolution between Bryant Woods and Swansfield. I think there are maybe opportunities for things like that, and we can certainly explore those if it's the board's desire for us to look into it.
I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that the community has at least put forward a suggestion, and it might be worth evaluating given the current state of, given the situation. So I'll throw it out there.
Okay. Are you okay, Ms. Mallow? Yep, must be.
Absolutely. I'm good for now.
Ms. Coturnio?
Yeah, the Swansfield, I think it was a difference of 70 students in between from November, and then now the new projections, they have fewer, 70 students fewer, and then Bryant Woods is in the opposite direction. So it is concerning how far off projections were from the November, and I know a lot of things changed, but that is something to consider, because I guess Swansfield is at 77% or something capacity. I wanted to tag on to what Ms. Delmont Small was saying about the not changing the capacity. Waverly is not getting smaller. It's got a increased projected enrollment from November till today. I think it was 32 more students than what was projected. So I think it is incumbent upon the board to make sure that these additions of programs are able to be handled by the schools and the physical spaces, because what looks good on paper isn't always what looks good in reality. And these students, they take up space, and a lot of them have equipment and such. And so I think we need to watch this carefully. I am concerned that we haven't decreased the capacity of the schools that are getting more students. I wanted to just point out an error under high school, and the feasibility study said that the development Westmount would be contributing to Marriott's Ridge, and Westmount is now redistricted to Glenelg. So I just wanted to point that out, that there was an error in the feasibility study. And I know that this is just, this is a working document, and a million things are going to change. So I think we could be here all day picking this apart. But I think, we will go forth. And I'm sure there's going to be a million more questions, but a lot of my questions are capital project related. Oh, I know what I was going to ask. For Turf Valley, I mean, the overcrowding is right now today, almost all of the schools in the North Central have higher capacities than what were projected even in November, and are already over, and there's less capacity there than in the Southeast. And I know we have capacity at Bushy Park, but as we see how hard it is to redistrict from east to west, and how difficult that is, I'm just wondering if there's been any thought at all to repurposing the middle school land on Marriottsville Road into an elementary school site, since we already have it, and to provide capacity that way. Has there been any thought on that, or is that definitely a middle school site?
Ms. Cotroneo, Tim Rogers, we have had discussions to that extent. I think there are a lot of options there with schools and existing properties in that part of the county that we'll need to explore as we go forward. I think, and your point about Bushy Park is well taken, that it's proven difficult to be able to use that capacity to relieve that region. And the comment I would add to that is in capital project funding from the state. As the state evaluates our requests for projects, one of the things they always look at is capacity at adjacent school to make sure we can't just redistrict our way out of that need. And so Bushy Park would undoubtedly be part of any funding request for a capital project in that area. And
well, also, I think also it sometimes makes more sense to redistrict from Triadelphia and the Southwest up to Bushy Park rather than going, but, you know, and that might be, I think, a little more doable than from east to west. But I'm just wondering, because the growth in that area, the allocations that are reserved for the north central part of the county are through the roof. And I'm, you know, as we all know, Turf Valley has no brakes on it. And we are always behind there. We put an addition on, and Waverly was over capacity within, you know, that school year after getting an addition. So I just remain concerned about that area. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I thought I'd come in and just question. I know you look at birth rates and you look at moving, but with this being a very unique year, one of the things that I think you should look at in the fall is the number of families that decide to homeschool. You know, some people have their kids at home now and are having to do online stuff, but at the same time, there's some families who may take this as an opportunity to homeschool their children, and they will not be coming back to us in the fall. I know that's not something that you know what's going on yet, but it was interesting at a meeting I was at today with the House Appropriations Committee in Annapolis, and one of the requests they were making, I think it might have even been PZAM, the Superintendents Association, were looking at maybe not using September 30th as the day to set the enrollment or to look at enrollment numbers, but moving it back to October 30th to see, in fact, how many students do come back to our classrooms next fall. So that's more of a comment than a question. I'm going to go to Ms. Coombs.
So to clarify, Ms. Mallow, are you proposing redistricting and reversing the changes that were made last fall for this year?
I am not making a proposal. I was elevating a concern that was brought to me, and I thought I should share it with my colleagues as well as with the Office of School Planning.
Okay, Ms. Coombs, more questions? Ms. Delmont Small?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear any of that.
Okay, you didn't hear Ms. Mallow?
No, I didn't. I just got an unstable.
Okay, Ms. Mallow, could you repeat your answer, please?
I said that I was not making any proposals. I was trying to elevate a concern that I had heard from the community and bring it to the attention of my colleagues in the Office of School Planning.
Okay, so Ms. Coombs, do you have additional questions?
No.
Okay, Ms. Delmont Small.
Thank you. So I appreciate what you said, Chair Ellis, regarding what's going to happen next year. But I think we have to be careful about how we look at and what to read into the data if we have a lot of students who aren't physically coming back and are homeschooling, to see when hopefully we get to a non-COVID-19 situation and what that means as far as impact on our capacity needs in the future. There is one issue that we didn't really touch on, and I would like to do so, which is the increased need of regional early childhood centers, pre-K, birth to 5. And we have a challenge in providing capacity for our K through 12. This is another piece that was talked a lot about with Kerwin, that we don't know what's going to happen with that. But has there been thought on the system's part as far as looking to the county to help provide those type of services, and for the county to partner with organizations and nonprofits so that we as the school system, maybe there's a way where we wouldn't have to have those particular capacity issues if other options were looked into.
That's a actually great statement, Ms. Delmont-Small. Actually, yes, we have been, we haven't really explored the option in terms of partnerships with other agencies. It is actually one of our recommendations in the feasibility study to study the early childhood regional centers and to perhaps centralize them. That is one of the recommendations within the feasibility study. It is talked about. We have talked about some things, but we have not gotten very far down into how that's going to happen, what it's going to look like. But we are trying to organize ourselves in that respect.
Great. I appreciate that because, again, it goes to that thinking outside of the box, because if those type of uses could be placed where, for example, there are other social services that would be available, it might help our population access to other services that we as a school system don't provide, but as the county and other nonprofits do. So I'm glad to hear that we are looking for that, because if that is going to be something that we have to calculate in, I really don't know. I'm very concerned with us not being able to do anything well as far as being able to have space for all of our students. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Coombs, is your hand up again?
Nope, sorry about that.
Okay, so we're ready to move on to the personnel agenda, administrative appointments and promotions. Dr. Martirano.